pills can't help motivate you. So I really want to put that out there, because when it comes to recovery, which is what we're talking about today, that's one of the biggest things is motivation, right? Motivation to go to a support group, motivation to call a support person, motivation to, do it. And a pill can't motivate you. A pill can do a lot of things, but a pill cannot motivate you.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is B. Reeves, Director of Business Development at New Waters Recovery, sitting here with our CEO, Justin McClendon, and our very special guest, Roxanne McDonald, who I believe is in Charlotte. I know she lives there. Where are you right now, Roxanne?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
I hear you. Well, Roxanne and I have gotten to know each other over the last several years as a recovery coach, and now she's an interventionist. And she's also a recovery comedian. And that's something I've wanted to ask her about, and I've kind of purposely not asked too much about it to save it for this. So welcome, Roxanne. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be on the podcast today.
We're glad to have you. What, give us a little bit of a background on just, little bullet points on what all you do.
On what I do. So I am an interventionist, and I also do coaching, family coaching, recovery coaching. And I have kind of a co-occurring specialty with my recovery coaching. I also do ADHD coaching. I just found that looking through recovery through the ADHD perspective, I felt like required a different skill set. So I wanted to make sure that I had those skills to help my clients create better outcomes.
What kind of stats do you see in terms of correlation between ADHD and people who with substance use disorder?
That's a great question. The way I kind of came about this was as a recovery coach. A lot of times I would take my clients to their doctor's appointments and meet with their doctors when they were doing medication. And my first thought was, why does everybody have ADHD? That was my first thought. And then he would ask all these questions, and in my head I'd be thinking, oh my gosh, I do that. Oh my gosh, is that really ADHD? Oh my gosh. And so it really kind of started this whole different journey for me. And that was the first thing I looked at, was what is the correlation between ADHD and substance use disorder? And depending upon what statistics you look at, it's 25 to 40% have, and that's diagnosed, right? That's diagnosed. That doesn't even include self-diagnosis. 25 to 40% have ADHD.
That's a big number.
That's a big number. Can't ignore it. I didn't feel like I could.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may have answered this already, but are you saying that 25 to 40% of people with substance use disorder have ADHD, or is it the reverse of that?
25 to 40% of people who have a substance use disorder also have a co-occurring ADHD.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Maybe it was the same answer. I'm not sure. Fuzzy math. Well, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I mean, when I was 14, I failed French. And so the next thing I know, I'm in a doctor's office and I have ADHD and was on Ritalin. And then that became Adderall for 27 years until I got sober. And I'm not saying I don't have ADHD. And in fact, when I was leaving the treatment center, and I was also prescribed to antidepressant and Ambien, Adderall, Xanax, antidepressant, came in for opiates. I'm also an alcoholic. I mean, total mess, of course. But when I was leaving, the doctor there said, do you think you're depressed? Because I was now off all these medications. I said, I don't know. He said, I don't think you are. I said, yeah, I don't really either. And he said, do you think you have ADHD? I said, maybe. He said, I think you do. But let's see what it's like to just live without it, without the drugs for it, and go from there. And I kind of just live with it. What do you think about this, Justin? What do you think about what we see in terms of it?
Yeah, I think it's a big topic, and there's varying opinions, and I think people are individuals too, right? So I mean, how can people, cope with things and who needs medication and who can kind of utilize some other kind of life skills to help learn to cope with that. I think this is just, some really big questions, and it's different. I think the answer is different with everybody. I'm interested though, just hearing that 25 to 40%, because, especially I think anybody that works in this field long enough, you do see such a huge incidence of people coming in for treatment that struggle with ADHD. And there's the complexity of exactly what you said, B, is that, if they're coming in and they've also been taking, some type of ADHD medication for a number of years or however long, there's the question of, okay, is it helpful? Are you abusing it? Is this part of the substance use issue? What does it look like, right? If we take them off of it, are they still going to struggle with ADHD? So there's a lot of complexities to it. But as I'm sitting here thinking about it, Roxanne, like, gosh, I mean, it's a large portion of individuals that struggle with those two issues at the same time.
Yeah. And what's the sort of age range you're typically seeing, Roxanne?
I see a little bit of every age. That I work with personally would be college age up. So, I personally see 20 plus.
Okay.
But it's all over the board.
Mm-hmm. And are you seeing where people who have ADHD and or just got a prescription to Adderall or the equivalent have graduated, air quotes, to meth?
Not in this private practice. When I worked in a drug and alcohol treatment center, I saw a lot of people who had a stimulant misuse that would, if in a relapse, would use street drugs.
Right. And the reason I just mentioned my own personal history with it is not so much like, hey, I'm like, textbook, the guy who has both, which is true. But the thing is, when I did get sober and I was, go back and tell my story, my kind of, drunkology, what do we call it? The chronology we do with that drunkology. And, I realized, even though I had experimented with marijuana and alcohol before that, but when I really trace it, my mind and mood were pretty much altered until I got sober from 14 to 41, because I was always at least on Ritalin and then Adderall.
Mm. Yeah. And I think, back to kind of what I was saying a minute ago, and we see this, I think, in New Waters, for an example, all the time, right? I think there's just different, subsets of what that looks like, and everybody's different. And I think there's some people that, like, the ADHD is really, truly so severe that, like, they just can't function without having some kind of medication. That's obviously even in itself a bigger question, with enough time and, enough kind of coaching around certain skills, can they maybe live without that? But I think especially in the beginning stages of recovery and your first, getting sober from drugs and alcohol and things like that, there's a lot of people that they just cannot function. Like, their attention is just not there unless they have some medication. So, but then again, there's the gray area of, like, is it helpful? Are we supporting continued use of something that's not helpful? So there's a lot of kind of sorting out that needs to happen there. But I think there's also a lot of people that, with the right kind of coaching, and maybe this is a good opportunity for you to talk a little bit more about how you approach this with people, Roxanne, but with enough coaching on, like, life skills and, like, mindfulness practices, organizational practices and skills and things like that people can learn to function in a healthy and productive way without necessarily using medications for it, especially if it's somebody that has a tendency to abuse it, because that's always a problem for that person. Any thoughts on that, Roxanne? Or maybe talk a little bit about if there's certain things that you kind of help people with along those lines.
Well, the issue of medication always comes up, and it's a very hot topic, right? Especially at this therapeutic level. What I like to say about that is, one, I'm not a doctor. I just work with clients who work with their doctors. And I just help with that. But what I would say is, pills can't help motivate you. So I really want to put that out there, because when it comes to recovery, which is what we're talking about today, that's one of the biggest things is motivation, right?
Absolutely.
Motivation to go to a support group, motivation to call a support person, motivation to, do it. And a pill can't motivate you. A pill can do a lot of things, but a pill cannot motivate you. And so, with or without medication, you're still going to need some good coaching on how to do that, right? And so what we know is ADHD, it's funny when you look at the symptomology of ADHD and substance use disorder, like it's a 100%. I mean, it's 100%, but like on steroids, right? Because somebody who has ADHD, they typically will have sensory sensitivity. So you might experience the post-acute withdrawal symptoms, let's say on a scale of 1 to 5. Somebody with ADHD might experience that on a scale of 10 to 30. I mean, because we just have such a sensory sensitivity. So I always say we experience life, we're so much more intensely than others, but have less to process it with, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So having skills to motivate, and those are going to be things from, a lot of it just starts with awareness, right? So here's an example. The guy who says, well, I'm late to everything. That sounds like awareness, but that's not really awareness, right? Awareness is, it's cost me 3 jobs. My clients are disgruntled and unhappy when I arrive. My spouse, wife, partner is upset every time I show up. That is self-awareness. So one is really trying to create and develop a real sense of awareness. Another one is, dopamine. Again, it all goes back to the dopamine. How can we, because if somebody with post-acute withdrawal symptoms starts with, say, 0, then we're at a negative 50. So, so how do we increase the dopamine? And, it's like you said, the mindfulness. Exercise is great. Anybody with ADHD, statistics show that they should be doing a minimum of like 30 minutes, 5 days a week, I think it is, to create more dopamine. And dopamine isn't just exercise, right? Like if I'm working, I have a thing I do where I work for 25 minutes. I take a 5-minute break and I get a reward. We're motivated by reward. That gives us a dopamine spike. That's not food. That's not, for me, I love my dog to pieces. You should meet Pickles. He's the best. I'll just go love up my little dog for 5 minutes. I'll take a walk. I'll go out in my backyard in nature. So increasing dopamine, but then all the skill sets around time management, task initiation, task switching. I'm sure I'm missing a lot. Really, a lot is about routine, creating routines, and skills to help manage this. And as it relates, again, back to the substance use disorder, is somebody with ADHD has a tendency to become very overwhelmed. Again, it's our sensory overload. Like we could just work a day and we come home, we're like, right? We're just exhausted. We're just absolutely exhausted. And, so somebody like that really has to have a lot of good skills and skill sets to be able to take care of themselves. Because here's an example. I work 8 hours. Let's say it's 9 with travel time. And then it's time to call a sponsor, go to a meeting, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I just want to play corpse. In fact, I probably need to play corpse for 30 minutes. But being able, right, to being able how to deal with that sense of overwhelm. That's a big one for us. Here's an expression, recovery expression. The only thing you have to change is everything. Holy crap! I'm out. Like that just sounds really overwhelming to me. So I think really being able to work with someone who knows how to really break it down into small steps and to just keep breaking it down and coaching it in really manageable pieces to help you navigate this, I really think is very beneficial for someone who has this co-occurring disorder.
I hear you. I think that's probably, of all the sort of subcategories of somebody with substance use disorder who would need this service, it would be people with ADHD, which sounds like, almost half of the people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I hear you.
So Roxanne, what is it? So coaching, you mentioned family coaching, the ADHD coaching, recovery coaching. Can you tell us a little bit more about like, what does that look like? Are you kind of day to day helping those individuals, or what's the kind of key components of that coaching work that you do?
So, a lot of this comes from my lived experience. First of all, I'm 27 years clean and sober. I have a very grisly story. Thank you. I have a very grisly story. I would like to think that I have 27 years of experience of really developing resiliency and being able to quantify that and turn that into a teachable skill to somebody else. My first husband died of alcoholism. My second marriage was an 18-year relationship in active recovery. I was able to raise a child in a home of active quality recovery. So I have that experience. That really translates well into the family coaching. I have a daughter with substance use disorder and mental health. I'm also the child of, the sibling of, so I have a lot of lived experience. Family coaching started, it started really, I was working in a treatment center and I was running groups and I would see how the families did in group. And then I would work with them one-on-one and I'd be like, whoa, this is really very different one-on-one than it is in a group scenario. And, I saw where the one-on-one would help. And I think really where I decided I needed to do it in a coaching, in private practice was someone came to me, it was an intervention. And it was obvious to me that the family had no boundaries, had been enabling their loved one for a number of years. And the intervention would not be successful if they did not have the ability to really have a whole perspective change, right? A narrative of from helplessness to hopefulness, right? Just change the narrative and really be able to see how supporting a life of recovery and not addiction was loving, was kind, was compassionate. It really is a complete flip of the script in their head. And so it started, I ended up having to just coach long enough till they could hold a boundary and stop the enabling so that the intervention could become successful. And I really think that's kind of how it was born. And then there's some on the other end, right? The loved one comes home. And so how do we learn how to navigate that? Right now, I need to just create a safe space so that the transformation can really happen, right? So I think that's a little bit about family coaching. Recovery coaching is a lot of accountability. So, most have been to treatment, not all. I get some that are catch-all that, don't have a treatment experience. But hopefully there's a therapist or a therapeutic experience, because I don't load the wagon, right? The therapist loads the wagon, right? That's their job. My job as a coach is just to push the wagon, because now you are practicing your skills in real time. In a protective bubble, it's great, but the rubber hits the road, or that jumping off point, as we talk about it, happens when you are practicing this in your home, and when you are not in a structured environment. So hopefully my clients are working with therapists, or they've had a therapeutic experience, because as a coach, I don't load the wagon, I just push the wagon. So the therapist teaches you all your hows and your whys, and I'm just here to help you practice your skill sets real time. Does that make sense?
It does. And I wanted to repeat something you said a second ago, which I thought was just amazing and so simple yet so powerful. When you said, talking about the families, talking about to the loved one, I can support your life of recovery, but will no longer support your life in addiction. Is that what you said?
Yes. Teaching families. Yeah, teaching families. Because oftentimes enabling feels like an act of love, right? And I've been the mom. Like I know what that is. And so it feels like an act of love. But teaching them that supporting recovery is an act of love, that switch in perception is huge to the whole dynamic changing and being able to create an environment where the loved one can thrive in their transformation. It just really helps create the safe space where they can thrive in their recovery. This is the family as a whole. It's not just the individual, but I know you know that.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Family disease. Well, if that's not funny enough, let's talk about your recovery sober comedy career. How did you get into that?
So I came from I grew up in a very violent alcoholic home. And I think humor was kind of a way that I masked pain as a young person. And then as an adult, it was something that I did when I drank. And then, to be honest, in recovery, I think I used it. My story was so painful that I think if I had to tell you my story the way it felt, I think that I probably would have committed suicide, to be very transparent. I had a very, very, very grisly bottom. And so for me, I think humor was just the way that I could talk about really, really difficult stuff. And the way that it came about professionally was at about 14 years sober, my marriage hit a rough patch. And I no longer had drugs and alcohol to fall back on. And I had to find a creative outlet. I had to find an outlet for all this pain that I was experiencing. And I needed a way to just work through all these feelings that I had. And I went to an open mic at the Comedy Zone here in Charlotte. And unbeknownst to me, there was the booker in the audience. And I was picked up the very first time. It makes it sound like my very first open mic. I had a little bit more coaching than that, but I got picked up right away and was an opening act for the Comedy Zone. Started opening here for them for a number of years. And I've been doing stand-up comedy. Gosh, I don't even know how long now. Like, I guess I've been doing it professionally like 12 years. But what I found is there are therapeutic studies that show appropriate use of humor engages people 30% higher, has a 30% higher engagement factor. And so I started using it actually kind of by accident. I was running groups in a treatment center and something happened. And it was one of those days where the population was having a bad. And I just started screaming, everybody out of your chairs, out of your chairs, out of your chairs. And it was an out of body experience. I just started doing improv. And so I started kind of doing it in a therapeutic environment as well. And I was able to use humor as a way to connect with clients. And comedy skills translate well over into coaching and into interventions because you can really use humor to disarm people, to allow them to feel comfortable enough to really share and engage at a level that they might not in a different environment, I think is what I wanted to say.
Yes. And I completely agree with you that their stats are the stats, but I just know when I was sitting in treatment and after the fog had lifted and was sort of what we would probably call on a pink cloud, but I started laughing the way I hadn't laughed since I was probably 12 years old, that just very innocent, just belly laugh. And if we're not a glum lot, it tells us that, and if life clean and sober and recovery weren't hilarious and full of laughs, and we couldn't be self-deprecating and laugh at ourselves, and if we took ourselves too seriously, Rule 62, if we broke Rule 62 in life every day, I wouldn't want to be sober. I wouldn't stay sober. But the fact that we can all laugh at ourselves, and that people, you've even taken it to the next level where you are, a professional comedian in recovery and helping people, especially somebody who's kind of sober curious or on the fence, and say like, oh my God, this isn't some serious, tragic thing. This is beautiful and funny and fun. I think that's awesome.
It is exactly what I was attracted to in recovery. I got sober at a time, almost 30 years ago, and, 12-step rooms is what we had back then. And that's what I was attracted to. I was attracted to the laughter. I already knew what depression, and anxiety and failure and, I already knew what all of that looked like and what it felt like. And I was so attracted to the laughter. I remember really being shocked that these people could say things and that they could laugh at themselves because, when I was out there in my disease, I had created this persona for the world to see, right? I called it the people, places, and things. And this persona, this face, this mask that I had put on for the world to see. And here were people talking about really painful things, and they were able to laugh at themselves and with each other. That was very attractive for me. And honestly, I think that's why I kept coming back, because like everybody else, I thought I was never going to have fun again. And I have had more fun in recovery, and I have gone on to do more with my life than I ever lied about sitting on a bar stool. And I lied about a lot on a bar stool, I'm here to say.
Well, that is well said. And so I think that's a great place to wrap it up. What tell us your tour dates and how we find you for resiliency recovery. Did I say it backwards? But tell us how to find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on social media, recoveryresiliency.com or Recovery Resiliency Services. So it's recoveryresiliency.com is my website, and Recovery Resiliency Services is social media.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Roxanne, thank you so much. And thank you for coming to see us recently. We will see you out there soon.
Yep.
Thank you,
Great
Roxanne.
you guys today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. If you liked what you heard today or just want to know more, give us a call on 919-670-8119 or visit us at newwatersrecovery.com. Thank you.